Greetings. Well, in front of me I have two CVH heads. This one here is a 1.6 and this one here is a 1.9 CFI. This is one of the ones with the roller cam in it. But I get a lot of questions about whether getting the Sealey tool is worth it or not. So this is the tool in question. They call it a Sealey 1770, I think. I threw away the packaging after I got it, so anyhow, the correct part number and title of it will be in the title of the video and the description, as well as where you can find it. There's many places you can get it. eBay, Amazon, and a whole bunch of different UK parts vendors sell it. It supposedly fits other heads, but it's primarily for these CVHs. And it's actually a lot bigger than it seems on the internet. Like, this guy is huge. You'd think, oh, well, that nut is probably the same size as the one that comes on the head. Yeah, not quite. This thing is huge. But it has to be, because depending on what valve springs you have, these guys can pack a lot of freaking pressure. Like, the normal ones have a pressure rating of almost 100 pounds, or yeah, 100 pounds, 100 psi. When they're fully closed, and that's just the stock ones. Some of the aftermarket ones have like over 150 when closed. When open, that number is drastically higher. These guys will get well over 200 when the valve is open. So that, of course, is when these are being compressed. But this tool has a few purposes. Well, one purpose really, but it works with every CVH head no problem. And it's a two-part thing. You get this nut dude, and then you get the tool itself. And you always get them together. I don't think anyone sells just one or the other, but you really need both. And here's why. So this is a 1.6 head. So this is obviously where a rocker would go. That's where a lifter would have been. So to use this guy, you can, the beauty of this is you can use this while the head is still mounted onto the engine. You just have to get it up to top dead center. So, like, my cam is, I think my cam's at top dead center. This one will get at top dead center. Well, for the first cylinder anyways. But anyhow, every cylinder you do has to be at top dead center when you're doing that cylinder. Because that's the only way to do it on the while the head is still attached to the engine, because then your piston will help hold up your valves. Sometimes, depending on what kind of pistons you have, you'll have to stuff rope like in through the spark plug hole to fill up the cylinder, and then that rope will keep the valve from dropping down. But this thing comes in handy. As you can see, the 1.6 heads, they all have these studs here for the rockers. So these are rocker studs. On the 1.9, they all have rocker bolts. You can see I removed one. Now there's a hole there. So this tool works with both just fine. So what you do is you take your nut off, your 1.6, set it off to the side, take your Sealey tool, set it over the right exactly where the rocker would have been, and you tighten this sucker down. It'll go down pretty far, but it won't bottom out. Well, it obviously, of course, everything bottoms out eventually, but what this will do is it will actually compress the spring long before it bottoms out. You see it's already bottomed out on the lifter bore. So now, while you crank this down, it'll be kind of hard to crank, but as you crank it down, it will compress that spring, and it'll do it pretty well. And then once it's compressed it, take something like a rubber mallet. Sometimes you have to tap the retainer, but obviously the tool's in the way, so you simply tap the edge of the tool, and they'll free up the little collets inside the retainer. Sometimes you can also tap the stem of the valve but it's kind of hard to do with the Sealey tool on it. But normally, like I said, you just tap the tool a couple times, you'll hear it. You'll hear the pitch change when you free up those two collets. Then once you free those up, you crank in this down all the way more. Take a magnet tool, go in there, fish out one, fish out the other, and then you can just pop off the valve spring and the valve spring retainer to change the oil, seal, replace, whatever else you need to do. If you're doing these heads on a bench, it's best to put a cloth under them, or some cardboard, insulation foam, or even clean wood. Anything that's not going to scratch, nick, or gnar up the aluminum head surface. Because that's the last thing you want to do, is do some head work on the bench and then go put it back on the engine, and yeah, your head gas is leaking after 1,500 miles. So be wise. Like I'm using a sweatshirt, nothing fancy, but it works. So like I said, this is a 1.9 rocker bolt instead of the rocker stud. Big difference. It's best to change these out for studs, because over time these will ruin the threads that are tapped into the head. And yeah, they can make a big mess, especially if you're using the Sealey tool a lot. Every time you run this in and out, it will do damage on those threads. If you have to keep using these rocker bolts for a temporary fix, what you can do is put some oil in there, then run your bolt in and out. It'll help clean the threads, but again, it'll only last so long. But just like the 1.6, put the Sealey tool exactly where the rocker would be, and take your bolt and stick it down there. The heads of these bolts can vary. I haven't really had any issues with just using this bolt itself, to crank down the Sealey tool, but I'll show you once it's tightened. Sometimes you want or need to use a washer, and a washer will actually help a lot, because as you turn this guy, there's a lot of friction between the shoulder of the head of the bolt and the tool itself. You see, it doesn't sit in there perfectly until you actually start compressing the spring. So it's a good idea to put a washer underneath this guy to properly fill up that beveled chamber of the Sealey tool. But no, it's a really good idea to replace these bolts with studs. I don't know why Ford replaced the bolts with these studs, replace the studs with these bolts, because obviously the studs are better. Why would you make something that repeatedly destroys the head a little bit every time you pull it out? But I'm no Ford engineer. Anyhow, that's pretty much all you need to know. That's how it works. These guys do work great, like really great. The issue with these heads is when you take them off the car, there's not really a good valve compressor for them, due to a few things. The height of the head, like this height just from here to here is 6 inches, so no matter what, the valve spring compressor needs to clear at least 6 inches. And then once you turn it to the correct angle, you now need to clear an inch further because you've changed the angle. And then you have the angle of the valves to mess with, which also makes it a pain getting at the valve heads on the bottom side of the head, on the combustion chamber side. So most valve compressors can barely fit around the head, and you usually have to stick in the compressor from this angle to get at that valve, and then vice versa over here for that valve, and you have to do that back and forth the whole way, and it's a pain. The end ones, well, some of the end ones are easier to do than others, but it's still just a pain. But that's what makes the Sealey tool so great. I I think these are like $35, $40, but I think you can only get them from Europe. The last time I was shopping around for this was about a year ago, and only Europeans were selling them. So I got it from a British place for like $35 or $42, something like that. But I had to wait just over 2 weeks, and then it finally came in. But man, let me tell you, it's worth its weight in gold. You know, because regular spring compressors, they can barely fit around the valve spring and the head casting. You know, I have yet to find any suitable replacement for this. So this is just the standard when working with these. I couldn't imagine using anything else. These are great. But yes, we'll leave it at that. It's, you know, there we go, 11-minute video on a tool. But once you get one of these, you'll love it. You'll never want to sell it. You won't sell it until you're out of these heads. So yeah, we'll call it quits, and I'll leave you guys alone for a while. So enjoy your head building.